Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go up to all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, October the 18th, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host of the most, Will Buchanan, on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast, which means we do try to get our sources from the most reputable places with award-winning journalism and research. We try to skip the sensationalism like Fox News or whatever is extreme left or extreme right. Just the facts of what we try to give you. At the same time, we do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. And at the same time, guys, maybe things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we start off this wonderful midday? Well, not really a best way to start this, except let's start with the Republicans. You know, the ones that decided that Kevin McCarthy needed to go because he was put in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. With the fact of the spending bill and avoiding government shutdown, and you had the crazies of the Conservative Party that simply wanted him gone. Well, a little bit of a problem now since they could decide on getting rid of McCarthy. Well, the two top choices don't seem to be faring very well.
Countless closed-door meetings and constant infighting, Republicans in Congress are now looking to the heavens for answers.
We're a ship that doesn't have a rudder right now, and I'm thoroughly disappointed in the process. And I just pray to God that we find something. That
something is one person who can marshal the support of 217 Republicans in Congress. A goal so elusive that Steve Scalise, the man who once had the most support, just gave up.
Our conference still has to come together and is not there. There are still some people that have their own agendas.
The Republican Civil War is so grave that it has hobbled the entire Congress. No legislation can emerge from the Capitol without a speaker in place. And that means the debate over funding to aid Israel, new policies to deal with the ongoing border crisis, and a looming government shutdown have not even started.
We need to make sure that we are functional for this country, and we're going to do that.
It's a numbers game for Republicans. There are currently 433 sitting members of Congress. 212 of those seats belong to Democrats. Republicans have a majority with 221 seats. But in order to be elected speaker, you need to reach a magic number of 217, meaning if all the Democrats and just 5 Republicans don't vote for the chosen candidate, a speaker can't be elected. It was enough to end Kevin McCarthy's speakership and prevent Scalise from getting there. And it remains a major barrier for other potential candidates like Jim Jordan as well.
We're going to have the same problem with Jordan that we had with Scalise. So I think it's a math problem, frankly.
And Jim Jordan is the likely frontrunner to be the next man up. He said last night that he would wait until today to announce his plans to seek the speakership out of respect for Scalise. Savannah?
All right, Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill. Quick.
So what's crazy about this? Steve Scalise, a man who said he was basically David Duke without the baggage. Yes, a man who compared himself to the former head of the KKK and said he's without baggage. Yeah, I wonder why that didn't really radiate very well with the rest of the GOP. But Scalise's out. Why? Because he can't get the votes. It's amazing to be Speaker of the House. You have to get 217 votes. With a 221 majority in the House, that would basically mean that all Republicans would have to agree with you. And yet, we keep hearing Republicans sit there and say, well, Democrats are the problem. Democrats are this. Democrats are that. Democrats are the reason why babies can't be babies. And yet Republicans seem to have one little problem of electing one person to be Speaker of the House. Complete disarray. And I don't blame the Democrats, actually. Democrats have sat there and said, leave us out of it. That's your party, not ours. But at the same time, guys, this again, I said this. I did not have this on my bingo card. I sat there and said the Republicans taking back the House would lead to nowhere. It would lead to useless investigations. It would lead to laws being pushed. It would lead, I'm sorry, not laws, bills being pushed through that don't benefit the American public. They would try their best to reverse Roe versus Wade and other landmark Supreme Court cases. And lo and behold, 2 out of 6. And now, Scalise not being part of it, let's talk about Jim Jordan, a man who at this point is running into the same issue. Because again, it is amazing how they all said Kevin McCarthy was a problem, but it took Kevin McCarthy 15 times to be nominated Speaker of the House. Jim Jordan is now on attempt number 2.
We're making progress. I feel good about it. We're going to keep going. I've had great conversations, great discussions with our colleagues. And frankly, no one in our conference wants to see any type of coalition government with Democrats. So we're going to keep working, and we're going to get to the votes.
How many ballots are you willing to go through?
Until we get a speaker, we got to have a speaker, and it can't be some deal with the Democrats. I mean, American people don't want that. They elect Republicans in a majority, small majority. I get it, but we got 200 votes in the first ballot. I think that maybe even is more than what Kevin got back in January. Right about where Kevin was. Gus Billaracis is a vote for us. That's 201. We've had good conversations. We're going to keep working.
But if it goes beyond 20, can you sustain it?
You know, I just love the fact that Jim Jordan gets there and say, well, what's our other option? Do we make a deal with Democrats? You might have to. Because again, keep in mind what I just said. Jim Jordan has already tried twice to be nominated for Speaker of the House. Yes, he is exactly right. The first vote got him 200 votes. He was just 17 short. And now the last one, the second one, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority speaker, got actually 217 votes versus Jim Jordan's 200. So let me get this straight. So you're telling me a man who got elected, a man on the Democratic side was able to get 217 votes, while Jim Jordan, for which if his entire party had voted for him, he would easily win, would only get 200 votes. Here's the problem. That yes, I love the fact of, well, we don't want to make a deal with Democrats. We have to stand together. You might have to make a deal with Democrats. And I love how when the journalist asked him, he says, well, how long you keep this up? Well, we got to have a speaker in the House, whatever it takes. Oh, we're going the Kevin McCarthy plan. You know, if it doesn't exceed, try 14 more times. This is and I can't stress this enough. This, for a lot of people, you voted this in. You voted these people in. You brought these people up. Why are we surprised now that when you look at the disarray of everything, they can't even vote on a speaker? Do you even want to imagine what they'll do voting on a bill? Voting on nominating key military personnel? Nominating people for certain offices? All I can sit there and say is, wow. Wow. Because if you don't think Jim Jordan, because at this point, Scalise and Jordan were the only two. I don't expect Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or Lorraine Bobbitt to really poke their heads out and say, oh, I'll be speaker, because it's amazing. We're also, well, I'm just going to pray to God that we're going to get an answer. You know, sometimes the answer is very simple. You might have to reach across the aisle. Jim Jordan may have to make a deal with the devil that he believes is Democrats. He may have to make a deal with them in order to be elected House Speaker. And I think for the longest time, that's going to eat them up. But hey, they got to do something. That government that little measure they put in to avoid the government shutdown, it does have an expiration date. But again, Republicans cannot say they are better than Democrats if they're too busy trying to pick over a speaker. And hopefully it doesn't take them 15 times to figure that out. It might take them 22. That being said, guys, we want to move over to Trump and his ongoing case. And again, should have saw this coming, but then again, it's Trump. He's a man that faces no consequence, and a judge decided to make an example out of him.
For trying to overturn the 2020 election. The judge has imposed a partial gag order on the former president after a series of incendiary comments from Trump. Senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky is tracking the case. Good morning, Aaron.
George, good morning to you. Donald Trump may be an outspoken presidential candidate, but as the judge says, he's also a criminal defendant who cannot say or do exactly as he pleases.
This morning, former President Trump is under a narrow gag order, prevented from saying or posting disparaging things about special counsel Jack Smith, court staff, or the witnesses in his federal election interference case. The judge saying Trump's language presents a danger to the administration of justice. The judge saying she cannot imagine any other criminal case in which the defendant is permitted to call the prosecutor deranged. The special counsel wanted similar restrictions on Trump's comments about the Justice Department and President Biden, but the judge refused. Trump is also permitted to keep claiming his prosecution is political and unfair, though he cannot launch what the judge called a pretrial smear campaign.
They put a gag order on me, and I'm not supposed to be talking about things that bad people do. And so we'll be appealing very quickly.
The defense argued the Biden administration is seeking to censor a political candidate in the middle of a political campaign. But the judge shot back, "You keep talking about censorship like the defendant has unfettered First Amendment rights. He doesn't." If Trump violates the gag order, the judge could impose sanctions, anything from a reprimand to fines to holding him in contempt. Trump says he's willing to go to jail if that's what it takes to win.
This is the second time this month the judge has imposed a partial gag order because of things Trump's said. His civil fraud trial here in New York, he's also limited in what he can say after, Robin, he disparaged the judge's clerk on social media.
We're also following news out of federal court.
So again, you know what? Here's the thing that kills me. That Trump is, and I got to call what he is. Trump is every napkin American's wet dream. A person that can say anything and do anything without consequence to them. And that's why people love him. That's why those of his cult love him. Because at this point, he has not faced any repercussions for what he said. Even going into court, I am going to talk about this court. I am going to talk about the witch hunt. I am going to talk about this prosecutor that just seems to have it out for me, this deranged prosecutor and this crazy ass judge. Here's the thing. Anybody who's ever been to court is going to sit there and tell you, first and foremost, don't tick off the judge. Judges don't like it when you talk about them, their prosecutors, their bailiffs, court clerks, or any of their staff. Judges do not like it. And judges will be quick to make an example out of your ass. Trump's about to find out the hard way because he sat there and said, well, I can't talk about it. No, well, because they put a gag order on me, but we're going to appeal it. You don't get to appeal those. You don't. And this tells me off the bat how much Trump doesn't know about the court system. He knows he has lawyers. He knows that he has swindled enough of his cult to give him money for his legal defense, because that's who's paying for his legal defense, his cult. For all the stuff that they're paying for through his websites and different PACs, they're paying for his legal defense. So again, he's gonna sit there and he's gonna say, well, we're just gonna litigate it. You can't litigate it. You cannot litigate a gag order. A gag order is serious. And again, like they said, the judge can do multiple fines. She can fine him in contempt. She could put him in jail if she wanted to. It depends on how she's feeling toward Trump. And right now, Trump is not on her good side. But the fact that he says that he thinks he can appeal it screams volumes to me. You don't get to appeal a gag order, sir. Once a judge issues it, that's it. It is there for the remainder of the case. But I love the fact that he says one thing. I love the fact that he says one thing that every prosecutor that has a case with him should be listening to. When he says, I am willing to go to jail to win our democracy, to put our democracy back in order. Every prosecutor should go, really? You want to go? You can? Trump, you may live out those words a lot sooner than you think, sir, because the simple fact of the matter is you sat there and I'm like, he thinks, and it's like the wildest thing about this is that he thinks that he's doing something. That's the crazy part. He thinks that he's doing, he thinks he's his patriot. Again, napkin American wet dream. Oh, I'm a patriot. I'm just using my God-given rights, as American to fight against a tyrannical government. Some of these napkin Americans have a patriot fetish that I just cannot understand. Cannot understand, will not understand. And again, like I said before, talking about Trump, he is a napkin American's wet dream. That the way they look at him, they revere him. And I tell people all that. I said, this is why I keep saying the entire time about voting and being informed. Because Trump only got in because basically a lot of people decided not to act. A lot of people who could vote didn't vote because they didn't like Hillary. You didn't like Hillary, you didn't like Trump. So you decided to do what you thought. Well, you decided to do what most people do. I'm just not going to vote. But what happened? A lot more of the crazies voted a lot more than the normal people did. Hence how we got stuck with Trump for 4 years. So that being said, we will definitely pay attention to these cases. I still say it'll be a miracle if Trump is still not in jail by 2024. Because again, he's leading the polls. He's leading the if you look at the Republican nomination right now, he's leading. The man hasn't been to 2 debates. They've already had 2 Republican debates. He has not attended either, even though both of them were shit shows. But at the same time, this man is still leading in the polls. And the thing he keeps saying the entire time is, why do I need to put myself in a debate? Because I'm leading. And again, if this man somehow isn't in a prison suit by 2024, it's not beyond the realm of possibility to believe this man could win the Republican nomination again. He really could. But again, we'll watch. I still say he'll be in contempt first before he gets nominated. Moving on, guys. We got this other story here that I think, if you guys remember, we talked about the student that was at Texas high school that was basically suspended for his hair. I know with the Crown Act, which was actually supposed to protect ethnic hair, and this student who wore his hair above his ears, because the school rule was that his hair had to be a certain, below the ear, a certain inches above the neck. However, his, because he has locks, were above his ears. Well, it seems this young man has now been referred to into alternative school. Now, the gentleman right there, Daryl George, that is the young man who is basically getting, in my opinion, he's basically getting singled out for his hair. Well, apparently because of issues at the school, they have decided to refer him to an alternative school. Now, you're probably wondering what they're talking about. Well, again, this is the crazy part about this school. Barber Hills High School, if you want to know. Barbers Hill High School in Texas, right? Sat there, and this came from the principal. She said, quote unquote, multiple infractions of campus and classroom rules, disruption of the ISS classroom, failure to comply with directives from staff administration, violation of tardy policy, and violation of the dress and grooming policy. As the school principal, I've determined that your child has engaged in chronic or repeated disciplinary infractions that violate the district's previously communicated standards of student conduct. I'm sorry, but that's kind of bullshit. Reason being because they had to, for anybody that's ever been around certain cases, been around certain people, or even been around certain jobs, they have to build up something against you to make you look like they're justified. Because, again, this guy, a junior, right? A junior in high school, you're going to sit there and tell me that aside from his hair, that he's had disruptions in the ISS classroom, in-school suspension for all those that don't know, failure to comply with directives from staff administration, not listening to teachers, violation of tardy policy, I guess being late multiple times, and violation of the dress and grooming policy. That's it. Because he refused to take down his hair, and I don't blame him. Like I said, I'm part of the lock generation. I love my locks. I, hope one day my children will decide to wear locks. That's up to them. But it is amazing to me that the school has to build it up this much, because they refuse to acknowledge that, hey, you're wrong. Not only that you're wrong, but you want to stick by your standards. Because What the school principal did, I guarantee that was looked over by a lawyer. It was looked over by a lawyer by the school. It was looked over by the superintendent. They wanted to make sure they dotted every I and crossed every T. Why? Because if it comes back and they try to sit there and say, you're still coming after us, we'll say, oh no, because we have this, this, and this. We're showing that he's a problem student. A problem student that wasn't a problem until you looked at his hair. And then you realize, oh, we can't keep him out of his hair because we'll look racist. Yes, in the South, a school that picks on a black kid is trying not to look racist. Tell me if you heard that one before. But again, been serving an in-school suspension, but apparently in ISS, he became such an issue that now he has to go to an alternative school. That alone is crazy, which again, I'm thankful that his parents did file a federal civil rights lawsuit against the school, against Governor Greg Abbott, and against the Texas Attorney General. So again, we will see what's going on because the Crown Act is enforced across all 50 states. So we're going to see what happens from there. But I just thought that was crazy that he literally went from just a kid who just wants to wear his hair, but wears it neatly and cleanly, because I've seen some kids out there of the napkin variety that have gotten hair that hair hasn't seen a soap or a brush or conditioner or shampoo or soap in a while. And they're allowed to walk around just fine. You're telling me a kid with hair like mine that, hey, you can't have that. Well, you can't tolerate federal law with the Crown Act. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised about the next story, guys, as we talk about what's going on the other side of the world, because, well, we would be remiss if we wouldn't talk about what's going on between Israel and Palestinians and Hamas. And I will say it like this, guys. For most Black people, we really drink our water and mind our business. We really do. That also being said, I do believe that you should be informed. I do believe that you should go out there and check the history of Israel and Palestinians. I do believe you should check out the history of Hamas. I do believe that, before you make a decision, decide on who you want to side with, you should be well informed of everything. At the same time, also understand that the U.S. has been involved over there because we have a strategic military base in Israel, and also give them foreign aid every year, which again, I question. But again, do your research before you pick a side. And again, just because you didn't, I have to keep pointing that out because, again, it's one of those situations where, well, I'm with Israel, or I'm with Palestinians, or I'm with Hamas. Again, get informed first, because it's way too easy to pick a side and then find out that, oh, crap, I did not really think this through. Hence, the reason for my podcast. Always stay informed. But we're not going to speak about it from that side. We're going to speak about it from the other side because, as you know, the U.S., if there's anything that profits from, it's war.
1,000 U.S. troops are now on a heightened state of readiness for possible deployment in response to the Israel-Hamas war. Officials say they haven't made a decision yet on sending troops, but Defense Secretary Austin is in close contact with U.S. allies and assessing the situation. ABC News national security and defense analyst and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy, joins me now for more on this. Mick, the Pentagon statements about these troops being ready, it's the same language they used right after Russia invaded Ukraine. So what do you make of it? What does that tell you?
So, Diane, I think it's the same kind of message. No escalation, no expansion, because the United States has not only superior military capacity, but we have the ability to project it anywhere in the world better than any other military. And I think that they're trying to send a message now to Iran when it comes to their capacity to control other proxies that they have, such as Hezbollah, and of course, their direct involvement in this conflict in Israel.
Mick, as Martha mentioned, these aren't combat troops. They're military personnel with capabilities like advising, support, medical support. So what would these units do if they were deployed? And how does that constitute a show of force if these aren't the troops that would go in for combat?
So, of course, we also have two carrier strike groups, one that's there and one that's en route. That is unprecedented in size and scope for having that level of capacity in the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, combined, that's 16 squadrons of fighter and support aircraft, for example. And we have a Marine Expeditionary Unit that's going in that direction. So there is combat power there. The 2,000, I think, are probably more likely to be actually utilized by the IDF, both for intelligence support, which they need, very much so in the potential assault on Gaza, and of course medical personnel should there start being a lot of casualties, which we all expect.
Mick, with Russia and Ukraine, there was this clear line, right? We heard the president say over and over again, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. So there seemed to be this clear line that if you go into NATO territory, you are now involving NATO countries in this war, including the U.S. Is there kind of a clear line in this conflict of what would bring U.S. involvement?
So I do think that's something that's being worked out between the White House and the Pentagon right now. So they at least internally know the triggers that General Kurilla at CENTCOM would need to have before direct engagement. I don't know if that's going to be public. It might be kept for some kind of strategic ambiguity purposes, but there certainly is a lot of discussion on that right now. And that is also a discussion that I believe President Biden will have with Prime Minister Netanyahu, just so both sides know what to expect if this escalates and expands.
And Mick, the Pentagon says even if these support troops are deployed, they won't be going to Israel. Why not?
So it might be that they can support outside of Israel. Perhaps it might be a space issue. Perhaps they don't want to put U.S. troops directly in a situation where they might be engaged, drawing the United States directly into the conflict. It could be either one of those, but I do believe that they're going to both provide support to the IDF and potentially, in the event that the United States does become involved, these support personnel are really important to start pre-staging in the region.
All right, ABC News National.
And again, we shouldn't be surprised. It's America. Look, guys, America we are a war country. And I talk about this all the time. And for all those that don't know, it's only been for the existence of this nation, there's only been 15 years where the United States was not in a theater of war. 15 years. We've been in a theater of war outside of 15 years ever since. And now we're about to be pulled into another one. Keep in mind, we're still in Afghanistan. We're still in the Ukraine, helping them fight Russia. And it looks like we're about to join Israel over there, even though they said, well, we're not going directly to Israel. Yes, we are. We have a strategic base over there. We give Israel foreign aid every year. So why do you not think we wouldn't be over there for? Netanyahu is just waiting. Netanyahu is about to make a phone call, and there goes U.S. troops. And I just never understood that. Like, for me personally, the only way I truly believe that the Middle East conflict will be settled is that we have to do to Israel what we did to Afghanistan and Iraq. We got to pull out. We have to pull out our troops. We had to pull out our resources. We had to pull out those things and let the two countries figure it out and let the two entities figure it out themselves. Because I have said this before, this is just my theory on it. When there's U.S. intervention, there's always seeming to be war in the Middle East. At the same time, I wonder what happens if you remove said presence. Now, again, that's not the only thing that the U.S. is gearing up for, because President Biden's going to have some explaining to do. And what I mean by that is, where does all this imaginary money come from to go overseas?
The Biden administration is also drafting a new foreign aid package. What are you learning about that plan?
Yeah, we're learning it could be really big as $100 billion, with perhaps $10 billion of that going towards Israel. Our sources tell us that the bulk of this proposal will probably be for Ukraine, that Congress could expect an official request from the White House later this week. Now, the U.S. already has an agreement to provide Israel with some aid, about $3.8 billion over 10 years. But it's easy to imagine how Israel is looking for more military assistance right now. Andrew.
Again,
Earlier, I spoke with National Security Council
spokesman. Quiet you. $100 billion. Think about this for a second. $100 billion package, which they said 10 of it goes to Israel. So that means 90 is going to go to Ukraine. $100 billion with a B. You know, I don't always want to say I want to give conservatives ammo, but this is where I would give conservatives ammo. It's like, hold on a second. Well, that means conservatives have to care about people too. But I'm on the other side of it. If I'm a Democrat, I'm like, wait, time out. So we can't raise minimum wage. We can't stop the feds from raising interest rates. We cannot cancel student loans, but we have money to send overseas. $100 billion, in fact, $100 billion to send overseas, no problem. And again, I have to ask this question. It's like, I'm like President Biden. I'd ask President Biden, what are you doing for the American people? Because it seems to me you're giving the American people promises. And yes, you may have done some of those promises, not all. I will give you that. But at the same time, there seems to be this issue of whenever it comes to foreigners, foreign countries, money just seems to be no object. And again, $100 billion, how does one really, I guess for lack of better words, how do you sit there and justify that? Because again, other folks could use that money. Other Americans could have used that money. You could have actually had your Congress actually move stuff forward. But I understand now because it's a little hard to, because conservatives can't figure out who they want as a speaker. I can understand that point. But again, how do we justify that? Truly, how? Because that's what I want to know. Because I get it. It's another war. The only people that profit from war are these military contractors and companies that build and create and build and ship and sell the weapons, the equipment, the vehicles. It's Christmas for them. I get it. The military-industrial complex rolls on, but at the same time, President Biden, you can't sit there and say that you want to eliminate $20,000 of student loan debt, but you're going to give Israel and Ukraine the equivalent of what you could have thrown at the student loan debt. It may have been a nice little chunk. It wouldn't have knocked it out. But again, the question just has to be asked. It's like, why in the world? And I have to ask that question. When it comes to foreign aid, you would think for a conservative to do something smart right now and ask, why is all this foreign aid going out the window when we have to worry about we're trying to cut down our own bills, and we're still out there helping Israel, we're still out there helping Ukraine, but yet we can't help our constituents. See, that's why if I ever had the chance to ask the president or the Madam Vice President, those would be the questions I ask. I would ask Congress. I would ask that question. How do you sit there and say you're helping the American people when, from a mathematical standpoint, you've done more for foreign countries than you've done for the American citizens? That's all I'm saying. But moving right along to the world of business, guys, I told you these strikes, it went from a hot labor summer to a coldest winter at this moment, because let's get back to the UAW strike, which doesn't seem to be showing any progress, especially since, Ford stopped playing ball.
Strike with losses climbing into the billions for the big three automakers. The executive chair of Ford is calling for the UAW to reach an agreement. Alex Perez joins us with the latest. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning, Robin. The strike is now in its fifth week, and the tension between the union auto workers and the automakers shows no point of easing at this point, no signs of easing at this point. Now, the UAW is escalating what it calls its targeted strike against the big three automakers, putting an additional squeeze on Ford, having some 9,000 employees walk off the job at Ford's lucrative Kentucky truck plant last week. In rare public comments, Ford Executive Chair Bill Ford called on the union to reach an agreement and unite to counter the growth of foreign automakers. But the union fired back, saying if Ford wants to be the all-American auto company, they can pay all-American wages and benefits. The auto workers are seeking a 40% pay raise, union representation at new electric battery plants, increased benefits, and more. Losses from the ongoing strike are estimated to have now reached a $7.3 $7 billion cost. About 34,000 union auto workers are on strike at more than 40 facilities across the country. Michael?
Yeah, hopefully they get it.
Now, what's crazy is
The United Auto Workers.
Now, what's so crazy about this, guys, is that the Ford executive was going to sit there and say, "Oh, well, we need the union to come to the table." Union's been at the table, but then again, that's every CEO. Every CEO is wanting, and this is why I say there's a big ass disconnect when it comes to those who don't have financial problems versus those that do. And you guys have seen on the podcast a few weeks ago, we showed you what General Motors had said, what Ford's CEOs have said, and Stellaris's, I guess his COO had said. It is amazing to me that how disconnected they are, because these are people that make multi-million-dollar salaries and bonuses. At the same time, they don't believe that a 40% increase in salary, they say, is unreasonable. I'll say it once and I'll say it again. A CEO can make 400 times more than what their employees make. Nobody bats an eye. That same employee asks for a pay raise, everybody loses their freaking minds. Because that's always the argument. Well, if we raise this, then the price of cars ought to be raised. Price of cars has already been the price, and this is why I said the argument is kind of bullshit. Because anytime they sit there and say, well, if you raise employee prices, then everything else goes up. Okay, let's think about that for a second. The price of the average vehicle is what? 55, 60 used to be. Your average truck could be anywhere from $65,000 to $75,000 on the low end. Your average sedan is anywhere from $55,000 to $60,000, again on the low end. Even your economy size vehicles, your compact cars, still could be anywhere between $50,000 to $55,000. But here's the thing: the price of those cars keep going up every year. Every year, the MSRP on vehicles goes up every year. The average auto worker that's on the union, their pay has not increased at all. So again, where is the whole thing about raising the wages of the workers will increase price on everything else? Oh, I can keep going. I can go to your local fast food point. Fast food used to be cheap and easy. That's why people love fast food. You can't go to McDonald's right now by yourself and think you're going to spend less than $10. For a family of 2, 3, 4, forget about it. You're spending at least $30. But again, guys, this is the point I'm making out, that they always try to sit there and say, well, if you increase employee prices, what we're selling goes up. No, it doesn't. That's just your excuse to drive up profits, because the only people that are actually making money in a post-pandemic, near recession time like this are corporations and those who own them. So again, I'm not feeling bad for the Ford CEO, except he has the ability right now. Here's the thing about those CEOs. They, at this current time, right now, have the ability to end the strikes by simply, what do you mean, Will, by giving them what they want? Yes, because you know what? Here's the thing about the auto workers. You need them. There's just one industry outside. There's 3 industries in the U.S. that workers, if they all unite and decide to walk off the job, can cripple those industries. The automotive industry is one of them. If all workers decide to walk off site right now, those big 3 would be hurting beyond what they have right now. Oh, but Will, they could send all their jobs overseas. Who's going to buy the cars? See, here's the thing. You can sit there and send the worker. You can send the work overseas. You can get foreign labor, even though it would go against everything Ford stands for. It'll go against everything GM Motors stands for. The thing I'm pointing out here is that if you send those jobs overseas, somebody has to buy those cars. And do you think that the China market, Japan, the European markets are going to be able to offset the losses that you would get from the United States not buying your product? Highly unlikely. The CEOs know it, but they believe that they starve out their workers, the workers will come back to the table. The workers are dug in. Because I keep telling you guys, this is why you should always join a union or form a union at your job. It is a lot easier to get their attention when you're in numbers versus by yourself. And trust me, you don't want to be by yourself against a corporation because they will not treat you like a human being. You will be treated like a statistic. So again, Mr. Ford CEO, it is up to you to make things right. Same with the General Motors CEO, and so is Stellantis CEO. They have the ability to go ahead and give these people what they want, because you know what happens at the end of these strikes? The workers usually get pay increases. Just saying. But again, guys, also one thing we got to point out, because if you go to a pharmacy for your meds on a monthly or weekly basis, you might want to start making sure your 90-day prescriptions are filled out for a while.
Rite Aid, one of the nation's largest pharmacy retailers, announced on Sunday that it's filed for bankruptcy. So what does it mean for the future of the business and its customers? Let's take a look by the numbers. Philadelphia-based Rite Aid filed for voluntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in New Jersey as it seeks to restructure its business and reduce debt. Now, that doesn't mean Rite Aid is going out of business. In fact, the company says it secured $3.45 billion in new financing to support its business operations. But the company says it will be closing some of its 2,100 stores in 17 states, focusing on closing underperforming locations while still serving their customers at other Rite Aid stores. Founded in 1962, Rite Aid employs more than 45,000 people, including 6,100 pharmacists. The company says where possible, it's looking to move employees to still open locations. Rite Aid has faced slumping sales compared to larger rivals like CVS and Walgreens, with Rite Aid saying that it's projected to lose between $650 to $680 million for its current fiscal year. Rite Aid has also faced more than 1,000 federal, state, and local lawsuits claiming that its pharmacies allegedly filled thousands of illegal prescriptions for painkillers, helping to fuel the opioid epidemic. The Justice Department filed suit against Rite Aid in the spring over unlawful opioid prescriptions, claims that Rite Aid has denied as it seeks to
Okay, so again, guys, that was just Rite Aid. Now I know a lot of people going, well, it's Rite Aid. They're going to file bankruptcy. Well, that's not the part I'm getting at. Because pharmacists at CVS and at Walgreens are about to strike. You see what I'm getting at here? The simple fact of the matter, guys, is that when it comes to strikes, this is why I say we should be concerned, because people are not working for peanuts anymore. And I love it. I love the fact that these strikes are happening. Now, will it affect those that get the prescriptions? Yes. If CVS and Walgreens do decide to file, and other pharmacies decide to strike, because if you've never been a pharmacy tech, you will not know how truly hard their job is. I mean, it is part lab work, part customer service. And as a person that's worked in customer service, I can tell you dealing with the human condition is not a walk in the park, especially when it comes to meds and people getting them. So I don't blame the pharmacy techs for considering a strike, for more pay, better conditions. And there it is again, more pay. This is why I sit there and say the entire time, the basis behind each of these strikes has always been pay, then conditions, then benefits, because people don't want to be people want to be paid. People want to be able to sit there and say, and it's not, again, for a lot of people, well, you want them to be rich. No one wants to be rich. People want to work a single job that supports the bills, keeps a roof over their head, keeps their children in a clean place, food on the table, and things of that nature. That's what they're wanting. They want a sustainable, livable wage, not poverty wages. It's that freaking simple. So again, the ball's in their court. I know with the UAW, UAW is dug in for the long haul. I know with SAG, with the Screen Actors Guild, they're in it for the long haul, which is surprising because the Writers Guild got solved in a matter of weeks, and yet the actors I thought would follow suit. But again, I digress. It's Hollywood. But again, so here to have the friend we got here, we're definitely pro-union, and again, stand in solidarity with them. Speaking of strikes, though, I told you this one wasn't going to last long. Kaiser Permanente and their labor union have reached a tentative deal. Keep in mind, Kaiser Permanente is one of the larger healthcare companies out there in the U.S. 75,000 union members walked off the job, and because of that, hence the strikes happened. Now, it is a tentative. Don't get me wrong. It is a tentative deal, which means that they have to go back to their union and basically vote on it to ratify it. But from what they're getting, they are getting an increased amount of what they asked for. Across the board wages increasing totaling 21% in the next 4 years. More as far as the profit sharing, and of course payout opportunities and investments in job training and development. Now think about what I just said for a second. Pay increases, getting a cut of profit sharing, and more, and again, minimum payout opportunities, substantial payout opportunities. So in other words, they're going to pay the people what they asked for. Now, again, this is tentative. They just need to go back to their union and see if it's going to be all agreed upon. And if it is, the strike is over. But like I just said, literally 30 seconds ago, how most strikes end are pretty much at the level of either you're going to give us what we want or your company's going to go under. Because most of these companies have realized you cannot send your stuff overseas and still hope to make a profit here in the U.S. I mean, the only people that can really do that is electronics, and that's a small market for electronics. But everything else, you do require American hands, so pay them appropriately. That's all I ask. But again, you guys heard me talk about earlier about the Federal Reserve still raising their hikes. Now, again, the Federal Reserve, I think they're at count number 7 this year. Count number 7 this year that they've raised interest rates to battle inflation, which again have basically tightened up the markets, which means that credit card rates have flew up. Banks are more hesitant to let people lend out money. At the same time, mortgages are just simply harder to get. Well, now we kind of have a new ally that certain housing companies are asking the Federal Reserve to basically stop.
Housing groups are calling on the Federal Reserve to stop rate hikes and sales of mortgage-backed securities until the housing market stabilizes. This comes as the war in Israel and war in Ukraine are causing uncertainty for the global economy. ABC Business reporter Alexis Christoforous joins me now for more on this. Alexis, let's start with the housing market. Why are these housing groups so concerned?
This is extraordinary to see the National Association of Realtors, National Association of Home Builders, and the Mortgage Bankers Association writing a letter to the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, asking him to please don't raise interest rates again because the housing market and financing in the housing market is unstable right now. I mean, we've really never seen a move by lobbyists, if you will. And look, the housing market has had a really tough time with these higher interest rates. Probably the industry hit the hardest. Mortgage rates are now touching 8% in some areas. 2 years ago, they were at about 3%. You take that together with low inventory and higher prices, and it's out of reach for so many people.
Meanwhile, the war in Israel is causing uncertainty around the world, but now some businesses are making adjustments for people who work for them, who are there, or clients. How's that working?
So global firms are starting to now adjust if they have a presence in Israel. And we just wanted to highlight some of the banks for you. So Bank of America just shutting down operations altogether in Tel Aviv. JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs telling employees there that they can work remotely. A number of airlines are suspending some of their flights to Tel Aviv, and also NVIDIA's.
And I apologize for that because that's going into what companies are doing regarding the Israel-Hamas war. But anyway, they did talk about, again, you have housing groups calling upon the Federal Reserve to stop rate hikes. They really should have stopped because, again, raising the interest rate was only built to stop inflation. However, inflation will not stop until, well, people get paid. Because again, I keep on saying this all the time, America is basically a capitalist consumer machine. If your consumers are not paying money into the system does not work. At the same time, those who are looking for a house, present company included, will find it more difficult because banks will not lend. And I think that's always crazy, not to go on a rant here, but banks have been bailed out when they played with Wall Street money. And those very same banks will turn around and tell a guy like me, nope, we can't give you a mortgage. Nope, we can't give you a loan. Nope, we can't give you this. Wait, you got bailed out by the government, so technically I paid for that. How is it that I don't get an automatic pass? That's all I'm saying. But Again, this is the problem, that we don't want to become a nation of renters. I mean, because the thing about renting is basically meaning that you never own anything, and that the money that you pay for just goes out the window and goes nowhere. You have nothing to show for it. Renting always reminds me of playing the casino. That, hey, as long as you have money, you can stay at the table. But when it's time to pay and you can't pay, then you got to go for someone else to wind up paying at the same place you were just at. That's what I think of renting. Renting is nothing more than a casino, and the ones that are winning are the owners. Hence why I truly believe that if you do want more homeowners, number one, the Federal Reserve will need to drop the rates heavily. But again, I digress. However, I do want to get to this story, guys, because you remember I talked about this a while back. The Supreme Court has an ethics problem, and it does, especially when you think of Anthony Scolari, when you think of, Uncle Tom, Clarence Thomas, the fact that they've been wooed and wowed by, Republican billionaires for trips and things of that nature. Surprisingly enough, Amy Coney Barrett has said that she would not be against the Supreme Court having an ethical code. Yeah, I wonder what hers would be.
For not having a code of conduct applying to Supreme Court justices. And Chief Justice Roberts has been quoted as saying the court is working on it. And various justices have made comments that there's not yet a consensus about such a code of conduct. The Senate has now passed a code of conduct applicable to justices. Let me ask you, do you favor a code of conduct for Supreme Court justices, and what benefits do you see that would provide?
I think it would be a good idea for us to do it, particularly so that we can communicate to the public exactly what it is that we're doing in a clearer way than perhaps we have been able to do so far. I will say this. There is no lack of consensus among the justices. There's unanimity among all nine justices that we should and do hold ourselves to the highest standards, highest ethical standards possible. So, I think what we are thinking about, in thinking about what I think about in a code of conduct, is how best to express what it is that we are already doing. And we already abide by the statutes, and there are a number of statutes that govern all judges, including justices. We all file our financial disclosure forms, for example, or like gift regulations. Those are statutory requirements. And then I personally, and this is true of my colleagues as well, still follow the same rules that applied to me when I was a Court of Appeals judge, the canons of conduct. There are some differences that apply to the court just by virtue of its position in the hierarchy of the judiciary. And I think, we spend our day job is, reading statutes and seeing if Congress anticipated everything or communicated everything clearly. And so, I think we want to do a good job at that. So.
Do you think it will take much longer to come to an agreement about what a code might be, or what do you foresee looking ahead?
Well, let's see. I think that's something that I can't really speak for the court about or make any sort of guess about that. I would just say that one thing I would want all of you all to know is that all 9 justices are very committed to the highest standards of ethical conduct. All 9 justices, and we're in agreement about what to do, and that we want to continue to follow the highest ethical standards. So any disagreement is nothing to do with either of them.
Okay, so here's the problem with this. That yes, she does believe that there needs to be a rule of ethics set for the Supreme Court. But she backs away when she's like, well, what do you think it should be? Well, I can't really speak for no, don't do that. Don't do that. See, you had me until you sat there and backed out. But had it been me, the Supreme Court does need an ethical rule. Why? They're human. You are human. Whenever you introduce the human element, there's always a chance that no matter how moralistic or how righteous that person is, there is always the chance that they may go left, that they may be tempted, that they may give in to temptation, that they may take a bribe, they may do something out of the norm for financial or professional gain. Hence why there needs to be an ethical code. Lawyers have it. That the bars, whenever you decide to go for the bar and get your license to actually be a lawyer, there's a code of ethics you need to follow. When you're in political office, there's a code of ethics you need to follow, albeit it's very loosely. When you're the president, same way. The thing about it is, when you hold any type of office or position, there is a line of ethics that you must follow, and violation has zero tolerance, except for the Supreme Court, because they don't answer to anyone. And I always thought that was a problem, because Clarence Thomas, when that was brought up, and Anthony Scalia was like, "Well, we don't need this." Yeah, you do, because just like Clarence Thomas, which again I go back to Uncle Tom, you can't explain how this Republican billionaire pays for your trips, bought your relative a house, paid for private tuition at private school, and you don't find that any way or form of conflict of interest. I'm just saying. So again, and also on the other side of it is, if a code of ethics for the Supreme Court is created, it cannot be anybody in the Supreme Court cannot be a part of it. You can't. That would be like those in the credit card and loan industry are writing the rule books for banks. That's like saying those that work at Goldman Sachs, those that work at Wells Fargo, former executives and lobbyists are writing the very same laws that Congress put in against themselves, which to a certain extent they probably are. The thing about the Supreme Court is, for the highest court in the land, its rules and ethics must be written by somebody outside the court. Why? Because that right there guarantees integrity. You can guarantee that the Supreme Court justices had no basis, had no impact on it, but have all agreed to follow it. That's what should happen. But again, I just found it funny that Amy Coney Barrett turned around and said that and then immediately backed out. Shouldn't be surprised by that. Last story I got, guys, well, it's funny to me anyway. Current Republican nominee hopeful, Tim Scott, his super PAC has canceled its planned fall ad buy. They said, quote unquote, right now would be a waste of money because the electorate isn't focused or ready for a Trump alternative. I'm not saying it's the white flag, but it's close. I mean, considering the fact, guys, that now we are beyond 2 presidential debates in, and that Tim Scott isn't really moving forward. I wonder why a black man trying to be the Republican nominee and a nearly all-white party that does not support minorities or women or people of the LGBTQ plus community. I wonder why he would have that issue. And the thing about it is, I said it earlier, Trump unfortunately has a Republican Party on lock. The man hasn't stepped foot in one freaking debate. He hasn't set foot in one debate. He spent more time in court than he has done in front of a podium, and yet he's still leading. And Tim Scott, the man who thought that, oh, I could be the alternative, I thought I could do this, and I'm just saying, no, dude. I said this before, and I'll say it again. We should not be surprised about this, because we can go down the line. We can literally talk about Tim Scott and his failures. We can talk about Nikki Haley, that's not her real name, and that she's going to have the same problems. We could talk about America's scariest Christian, Mike Pence, and the fact that, again, he'll be seen as a traitor. We could sit there and talk about Vivek Ramaswamy, who, if you haven't seen the latest video, got completely destroyed by a person asking him a question. So what did we just say? Vivek, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence. That's just 4 people. And there's still, last time I checked, 8 candidates. I mean, I didn't even bring up Governor Chris Christie. That's how much of an afterthought he is right now. I didn't even bring him up. But this is the thing I'm getting at, guys. For Tim Scott's case, Tim Scott is slowly learning reality. And that reality is that nobody in the GOP wants a black man nobody wants a black man. Nonetheless, a woman to represent their party. Tim Scott knew it because he was basically following Trump. He kissed Trump's ass. His policies were shit. This man was the sole reason why the George Floyd Police Reform Act was killed. I can also say he probably also did have a hand in killing the Voting Rights Act, but that's not just him, it's other people as well. I don't feel bad for Tim Scott because he's slowly realizing that, yes, when it comes to two-leg stand-on, sir, you're repeating Tea Party politics. And yes, the Tea Party is what got you elected, but that party is all but hanging by a string now on life support. And if I was Tim Scott, might be time to bow gracefully, sir. But don't worry, you won't be the only one. Well, that's going to do it, guys. We're going to move on to our feel-good segment because usually how the Frack we got here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes they use faith and humanity. But hey, it is Wednesday, hump day. Tomorrow is Friday Eve, which is Thursday. We will leave you guys out with some good vibrations. And hopefully this story will do it because imagine the fact of having twins early and everybody counting them out at the same time. They survived and they thrived.
NICU Awareness Month and the survival story of twins born at just 22 weeks. They are two of the youngest twins ever to survive premature birth, thanks to their parents and a team of doctors at the Cleveland Clinic. Rhiannon Alley has the story. Good morning, Rhiannon.
Good morning to you, George. It is hard to believe. Just 11 months ago, twins Kamaya and DJ could literally fit in the palm of your hand, and they are now home with their family. At just 21 weeks pregnant, Kim Thomas learned she was 4 centimeters dilated.
I was just scared.
Just halfway through her pregnancy with twins. Doctors at the Cleveland Clinic say they did their best to stop her labor.
The odds for survival is very low.
But Kim's labor progressed, and twins Kamaya and DJ were born on October 12, 2022, at just 22 weeks and 1 day old. Both babies, not even a pound. They were rushed to the NICU with the odds against them.
They said even if they do survive, it's not likely they'll make it the first 3 days.
I feel like I know they won't remember it, but it was hard for them.
The staff say they had never worked with babies this tiny.
They fit in the palm of my hand.
Her extended hand actually wasn't even big enough to cover my thumbnail.
This is the smallest diaper that we have here, and even this little tiny diaper was large on them.
From a collapsed lung to a brain bleed, Kim and DJ say the first few months were a roller coaster.
I know.
But they never gave up hope.
Almost New Year's, we were like, okay, we got this. That's when they finally got to meet each other.
The nurses making sure each milestone was celebrated with special photo shoots. After 138 days in the NICU, the twins, still needing some supplemental oxygen, were ready to go home, complete with a celebration, officially the youngest surviving premature twins born at the Cleveland Clinic.
Everyone showed up. When I say every doctor that worked on them, pretty much all the nurses that were there.
This is quite an emotional moment for us.
I did have my doubts on day one that we would see that day, so that made it that much more incredible when it came.
Oh, they are just so sweet. The twins turn 1 next month and are doing great. By the way, the youngest preemies to ever survive were born only 1 day earlier than DJ and Kamaya at just 22 weeks. They are all just a true marvel of modern medicine, aren't they, Rebecca?
I think that's awesome because, again, take it from me, guys, because I know I had a son that was preemie, and I knew exactly what those parents were going through. But glad that it all worked out and that those twins are thriving. And again, have to leave you out on a good note. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for liking, for watching, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate it. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. For all those that may know or not know, I am actually helping a part of a coalition that's pushing Blurred Station. What is Blurred Station? I am glad you asked. Blurred Station is basically like Netflix, except you don't have to worry about your stuff disappearing. We are pushing We are definitely moving forward as far as new content or shows, animation, music, things of that nature. It is your one-stop shop to basically find us there. And again, at $10 a month, trust me, that price is sticky for right now. And for a limited time only, you do have affinity memberships. What that basically is, guys, is that you can join Blur Station, and after 36 months, you can opt in to own a piece of Blur Station. Yes, I said own, because again, how many of us have always decided how many have always wanted to either own a part of Netflix or Hulu or things of that nature? You'll be able to do so there. So again, definitely check out Blur Station, sign up for it. Let them know I sent you. I certainly appreciate it. Also, shout out to my boy Bond at BigBZA.net on social media. You can definitely check him out on his Beats page. If you are interested in beats, or if you're looking for something new or different, let him know. Definitely check him out, BigBZA. Everywhere you can find it. As for me, guys, you can find me BlackBox447 on all social media. I usually do reviews on just about everything. Of course, the link at the bottom, if you make this a little bit bigger for you guys to see, copy and paste that link into your browser. We'll take you to my link tree. That's the YouTube, Facebook, podcasts, groups, I should say, for all my podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, and of course, off of this podcast. Podcasts can be seen and heard practically everywhere, guys. So wherever you get your podcast or watch your podcast, it's pretty much where you can find me. And again, I still want to keep the conversation going, everything that we talked about. The only rule that I have, guys, is to pretty much keep it clean. Let the facts speak for themselves. And again, it is okay to agree to disagree. Sometimes that's the best way. That being said, guys, the last thing I'll say about how the Frack got here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information allowed you to make up your own mind. But we do provide you with a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better society as once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first black woman Supreme Court, electing our first black woman Federal Board of Governors, electing our first black woman as a National Cybersecurity Director. All great things. We don't learn from history. We are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up in our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians to still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll all get through this.